Welcome back to America's favorite game show. Not really, but it is one that you can play along at home or in your car. And the nice thing about Disney In or Out is that there is no right or wrong answer. Then again, my guests might agree with that statement if you disagree with them. One of the things I love most about being a Disney fan is really just how passionate we all are. If you don't believe me, check X and Facebook. For the most part, I think we all love the same parks and ships and movies and moments, but we still can see them completely differently. And I think that's honestly why these conversations are so much fun. You don't have to be right. You don't even have to agree. You just have to pick a side. And that is why and how Disney In or Out exists. And joining me once again this week are some longtime friends, fellow Disney and Cruise Line and Marvel and Star Wars fans, fellow entrepreneurs, and members of the WDW Radio Nation. They know their Disney. They are not afraid to share their opinion, which is podcast gold, and I think they are definitely ready to take a stand. Ladies first, I want to welcome back to the show Lisa Donato-Glassner from the Castle Run and Thousand Circles Images.
Thank you so much for having me. We were talking beforehand about how these shows require no research, which is supposed to be a good thing, but I always feel a little bit like aimless walking in without notes. So hopefully this is all familiar territory. We'll be good.
Lisa has her notepad and ChatGPT sitting at the ready just in case. And welcome back to the show is Matthew Woolley from Married to a Disney Addict. Matthew, welcome back.
Hi, Lou. Hi, Lisa. I'm so excited to be back. And I agree, Lisa. My teacher brain is like, I need research. I need my notepad. I need all this stuff. But I also do very much enjoy just being able to talk and chat. So I'm excited.
And I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Your show's title is Married to a Disney Addict. Who is married and who is the Disney addict on your side? Because you do the show.
Thank you for asking that, because I don't know either.
So Crystal, we refer to Crystal, my wife, as the OG addict. She is the one that grew up loving Disney and slowly chipped away at me becoming more and more of a Disney fan. But now we both call each other, we can both claim we're married to a Disney addict.
So In and Out is very simple, and here's how it works. I'm going to make a statement. It could be at the parks or movies or Disney Cruise Line, and you, my friends and guests, are going to tell me whether you're in, you agree, or out, you don't. Then you have 30 seconds-ish or so to make your case, defend your stand, and maybe even try and sway someone to your side. And you, our friend who's listening at home, I want you to play along. I really want to hear your thoughts, whether you are in or out, so you can share your opinions, your hot takes, comments, and complaints over in the WDW Radio Clubhouse at wdwradio.com/clubhouse, or call the voicemail at 407-900-9391. That's 407-900-WDW1. And I have a very long list of random-ish prompts that are ready. So I'm going to spin the randomizer wheel and just see where it lands, and we'll see how it goes from there. Ready?
Yes.
Yep.
So we'll go somewhat relatively timely-ish because this is news that just came out relatively recently, and it's something that's been talked about really since before day one that this land opened. So ladies first, and then Matthew, tell me if you're in or out. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge is going to be better now that it's dropping its oh so very strict timeline. Are you in or are you out?
I am in over my head. I am so in on this. I mean, I don't know that anybody, I'll wait to hear your responses, but I am so in on this. I mean, I think one of the most bizarre decisions, and I fully understand like the reasoning behind it and like the thinking behind it, like theoretically before the land opened, and in going with a different timeline and a different place, and not including the original trilogy and the original characters. But I think, those of us who love Star Wars and grew up with it or came to love it, that are younger, our hearts are with those original characters. And when, we all daydreamed about being able to step foot into the Star Wars universe, I think we all pictured stepping foot into a Star Wars universe with Luke and Darth Vader and, and all of the original characters. And I honestly get chills like thinking about being able to walk into Galaxy's Edge and meet those characters. They have them out even like at the Run Disney races, and even that gives me chills. Like being able to walk up to Darth Vader at one of the races and interact with him, during what they call like the Star Wars mile of the marathon. So I couldn't be more in on this one. And I think like from what I've seen online, I'm certainly not in the minority there.
Matt?
So there's no disagreement here. I'm totally in for, having the expanded timeline. I feel like I loved Galaxy's Edge, just the opportunity to go into a Star Wars story. And like Lisa said, I understood trying to link it to what was recent and relevant to the Star Wars, story as it was at that time. But anytime you can add anything to any land in Disney, but even Galaxy's Edge, to bring in more people that were fans, to expand what you're able to experience and do, I'm always for that. And, I'm going to kind of repeat what Lisa is saying, to see Luke, to see all of those characters that I grew up with, as a kid. And that was the Star Wars that I introduced my son to, not the newer stuff. He's seen the newer stuff, but I made sure he watched the original trilogy first, and he knows Vader, he knows Luke, and he wants to see those guys alongside the characters in the new movies. He still wants to see BB-8. He still wants to get that. And by kind of expanding the timeline, they're not replacing it entirely, but just growing it to include everything, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I can't wait to do the new Smuggler's Run mission and meet the new characters and all that stuff.
Yeah, obviously, I am very in as well, too. But I'll I sort of go back to when this was announced and say that I sort of understood the logic. Lisa loves when I say this. If you watch the replay of this on YouTube, or you can probably hear it as her eyes begin to roll back in her head, I talk about how when new attractions and lands are built, they are not necessarily being built for us. Us being, I won't say anybody's age, but we are of the slightly older generation. Look, Star Wars, the original Star Wars, 1977, that was a really long time ago. And if you have young kids, ask them, that's like, silent movies to them, because from a relative standpoint, that is what it was. So building Galaxy's Edge with characters that for those kids, for that generation behind us, was from a generation ago, I understood the logic. And then saying, well, if we include the latest trilogies, well, then maybe you're also, again, you are locking this place into a certain time and a certain story, and you're going to potentially exclude and not have the sentiment and nostalgia. So by having a clean slate and creating a brand new storyline and characters on paper, it almost makes sense, because you hope that the idea was you were going to go in and live your own Star Wars story. The same logic held true. We see that it didn't necessarily work for the Galactic Star Cruiser. What was missing was heart. What was missing was the soul, was missing the sentiment and the nostalgia and the emotion, because we don't have I do not have any emotional connection. Look, I love Oga and the Cantina, but I don't have any connection to that character. I didn't have connections to some of the other places and stories and names that were being created there. So bringing these characters in automatically, and I love the fact that a lot of things are sort of being, retrofitted to fit into those stories and characters so that they make sense. I think it is going to be a huge improvement. Also, I think it's going to be something that appeals multi-generationally, because once you sort of wipe away some of the strict timeline barriers and open yourself up to telling a variety of different stories from a variety of different stories, whether it is the original trilogy, the comic books, the video games, Disney Plus, whatever it is, I think that you appeal to a much broader, wider demographic that is going to have the love and connections, and from a business point of view, those love and connections translates into profit. So I think it is a smart move all around. Okay, let's go in terms of what's coming and what's changing, and this idea of nostalgia and sentiment, which has been the topic of conversation a lot over the past 12 to 18 months. This time we'll go Matthew and then Lisa. The Tomorrowland Speedway is the single most replaceable attraction in all of Walt Disney World. Are you in or are you out?
Wow. In all of Walt Disney World. If you had like narrowed it down to the land of the park, that'd be a lot easier, I think. The single most replaceable. So I'm going to not be selfish and like do this for myself. And this would be one of those instances where my wife would yell at me if I said Figment, but I'll never say Figment. I'll go with it. I'll say in, just because I think it is a little dated. My kids don't really have much desire to go on the Speedway to do it. They've seen it before. They go, oh, what's that? And they just kind of move on. There's never really that rush to say, oh, I have to get to the Speedway. Now, if things like Dino Land were still in existence, that my answer may have changed. Or I'm going, yes, I'm in. I think that they can do it. Whether that be they update the ride itself and give us a new version of Speedway or give us something completely different. As it stands now, I think it should be replaced.
Lisa?
So it's so funny that you mentioned Dino Land, because I literally wrote Dino Land down when you said that. And I was going to say, well, now that Dino Land is closed. So I'm going to replace a word and then I'm going to be in. So I'm not going to say it's the most replaceable, but I am going to say it's the most rethemable in all of Disney. And I think there's a missed opportunity there. I think like Speedway has a place in my heart because it's one of my kids' favorite attractions at Disney. And I think it's one of the few left where you can really play a role in the attraction and in riding it. I mean, they've taken we can talk about this too, but they've taken the interactive element out of Test Track. They've taken, a lot of the human elements out of things like what was the Great Movie Ride and things like that, and Living with the Land, where they used to have, a cast member on there. So the attractions where you really sort of play an active role, I think, are dwindling in the parks. And I think like growing up, like I can measure my kids' ages by when they could ride alone, when, like the different like height requirements for that. And so I love Speedway. Like I love the attraction Speedway. I think like visually it's a beautiful attraction. Like as a photographer, I've taken a lot of pictures in and on that attraction. I think it's beautiful and has a lot of color but I do think that like it's one of the few times where I would look at an attraction and wish there was more IP in it. I think, you could sort of add a Cars overlay. You could add, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to like maybe improve the ride experience a little bit, update the ride experience a little bit, and sort of add some IP to it to add to the fun. And so I would say it's the most sort of rethemable or improvable attraction in the parks. I'm skimming in my mind, seeing if I can come up with like a quick answer for something that would beat it out for replaceability. But I absolutely don't want it removed from the parks. But I would love to see a little bit more love go into like updating it and perhaps like adding a little bit more theming to it.
I think this one is tough because I think those of us who grew up going to Walt Disney World remember like riding that attraction with your dad or your mom or your grandfather. Like I'm still looking forward to the day, I can go with my son and he can reach the pedals for me so I can actually drive the car, which is going to be an exciting moment for me. And people have talked for years, and it's been rumored that the attraction was going to get updated, that they were going to put in electric vehicles. But there, we talk about, again, listen for Lisa's eye roll. We talk about when things get removed, what gets taken away. And it not necessarily is the attraction itself. It is the physical, it is the auditory, it is the sensory elements that come with it. So when you take away Tom Sawyer Island, it's not taking away walking through the dark caverns. It's taking away the kinetic element of the water. It's taking away the sound of the rafts. The Tomorrowland Speedway, the same thing. If you put electric vehicles in there, which has been rumored for years, you're going to take away that familiar, comforting sound of those little engines like puttering along. That smell, that very distinctive smell of those gasoline engines is part of the experience. This is not an environmental conversation, but it is part of that experience. And so I don't think, look, it takes up a big footprint, relatively speaking, in Magic Kingdom. You could do a lot with that space and where it is and what it backs up to. And, it was actually shortened years ago in order to build Mickey's Toontown Fair and Storybook Circus. But I don't know, is it one of those quintessential, original, OG Magic Kingdom attractions that is not replaceable? Because it is part of the childhood growing up experience. I think you could take away Tom Sawyer Island and say, well, my kids really didn't do it a lot. But every kid has wanted to drive that car. Every kid has bumped the vehicle in front of them the way you're not supposed to do it. But every kid has had that feeling of, riding with the parent and then being able to switch that seat and take control of that car, to your point. So I'll sort of extend or append this question. If Tomorrowland is not, or maybe is, the most replaceable attraction in Walt Disney World, if one, and you define this however you want, if one classic Magic Kingdom attraction had to go to make way for something that is truly groundbreaking, that attraction that everybody's going to go, oh God, like I am so excited for this. If one classic attraction had to go, it should be Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin. Are you in or are you out? Ladies first.
I am out. I'm again, it's like, it's the interactive element. These are the attractions that my kids ask to ride. Like the attractions that you're naming right now, and I think it speaks volumes. Like they are, without fail, like if we pop by Magic Kingdom, like my kids want to ride Speedway. They want to drive the cars on Speedway, and they want to go on Buzz Lightyear. And I'm absolutely thrilled and more than fine with the fact that it's, closed down for some refurb now. I'm excited to see like it's sort of the Disneyland style, holdable Astro Blasters and whatever other updates they make to the attraction. I think like it's another one that could use a little love, even though I had no complaints about the existing one. But I think like we need that campy stuff. We need those like fun, silly attractions. I would ride, and I'm probably vastly in the majority here, but I would ride by Buzz Lightyear all day over Toy Story Midway Mania, or Toy Story Mania now. It's just more fun for us. I mean, I appreciate.
It's also exhausting too. So.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate like the artistry of that ride and the storytelling of that ride and like the experience of that attraction. But just from like a raw fun perspective, like I would rather try to max out my score all day long on Buzz Lightyear. Like we all know where the high scoring targets are and where to aim. And like it's the one attraction like where you get excited if the ride goes down for a second and you get to sit still and like shoot the same target over and over again and try and rack your score up. So yeah, I think, I was racking my mind for like what that classic attraction would be if there had to be one as you were leading into this question. And I'm glad that wasn't the question, but yeah, no, Buzz is like an essential part of like the fun of a day at Magic Kingdom.
Yeah, not a lot of disagreeing going on here today. At least I agree. I can't get rid of Buzz. I enjoy it. That's my 90s kid arcade. Like I loved that type of stuff. So I always want to go on that. My boys always want to go on it. It's a very popular property in Toy Story and having that there. And I know we have Toy Story Land, but it's so well regarded and known that it should be in multiple parks. And when you were leading up to the question, I did the same thing, Lisa. I'm like, what attraction am I going to get rid of? And Buzz didn't even pop in my head. Like that wasn't even an option. We can't get rid of it. We got a new version coming out. It's an interactive thing. It's something that I feel like is different compared to what else you have in the park, the whole park in Magic Kingdom. And there's other spots in Tomorrowland that I think need to be messed with before they touch Buzz, especially with the new refurb that they're doing. But I would much rather see that empty void of Stitch's Great Escape get reused or Monsters, Inc. get rethemed to something else before they would touch Buzz Lightyear.
It's interesting because of where Buzz Lightyear is sitting next to really sort of an empty footprint where the old Galaxy Palace theater stage used to be. There's cast member parking back there. There is a potential opportunity for expansion, like a large expansion that could or could not include that footprint of the Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger spin and the not always very open, I still call it the Tomorrowland Noodle Station, but the Tomorrowland Terrace restaurant. And what I think is going to be, and maybe it's not going to be at this year's D23, the Ultimate Disney Fan, I'm going to call it Expo. We might not get into this year's D23 Expo, but man, I would bet almost anything that a Tomorrowland update and a reimagining of Tomorrowland is on a drawing board and is on an Imagineering timeline somewhere close down the road once some of these other projects are complete. This may be a very quick one for the two of you, but as we were talking about Buzz Lightyear, I was thinking about how we got to Buzz and what has this attraction and the whole Toy Story franchise evolved to, and some of the other attractions in Magic Kingdom. So, in or out, Disney should create more movies based on theme park attractions following the success of things like Pirates of the Caribbean. I actually loved the Jungle Cruise movie. So Disney should create more movies based on theme park attractions. Not all of them are winners. If you think back, are you in or are you out? Lisa, then Matthew.
Am I first? I think Matthew
Sure.
gets to go first. I'll go first.
Last time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that much to say about this, honestly. I don't have very strong feelings about it. I sometimes it's a hit and sometimes it's not. Like you've got situations like Haunted Mansion where it's sort of like womp womp. And then you've got situations like Pirates of the Caribbean where it like becomes a whole new attraction, like based on that. And I think like, I guess I'm sort of softly in on it. Like, why not? Why not like lean into, some of the attractions instead of, certainly instead of it always being the other way around, instead of like the attractions being lost to existing IP, perhaps we lean into the attractions and create IP out of those. I think like you could probably have a lot of fun with something like Everest or, there's a few like easy grabs that pop into my mind that could be a lot of fun. And if it's not a big hit, it's there for the hardcore fans to enjoy and in a campy sort of way. And once in a while you'll get a hit like a situation with Pirates where you end up with not an entirely new attraction, but certainly like an overlay that adds a lot more meaning and depth to it. So yeah, I think it could be fun and why not? And I certainly haven't. It's a conversation for another day, but I haven't fallen in love with some of the most recent movies, so I would be very much open to experimenting with something like that.
I'm in. I think that having some sort of anytime I can get new access to those stories, I'm going to take it. And I don't think that they're going to ever really just say, okay, well, this is the ride, so we have a 5 to 10 minute story. They have to expand on it. It creates like a whole new universe, I feel like, when they make a lot of these movies. Lisa, you mentioned like the Haunted Mansion movie. I didn't mind the new one. But I was looking at it as, I remember that from the ride, or that's the Easter egg for the ride. So if I didn't have that love of the attraction, I don't think I would have enjoyed the film as much. And the other thing is about it, I don't know how many attractions would warrant a movie, like a big movie. I would love Tower of Terror. While I enjoyed the Steve Guttenberg 90s movie, which I actually showed in my class recently this year for Halloween, which was funny, it would be a great, property to have a film. I don't know how many of those really big epic type pirates movies you can get out of a lot of the attractions if they haven't done them already. But anytime you can get a new story, if they can do it right and they can flesh it out and make it like a universe like they did with Pirates, I would go. I'd get my popcorn. I'd be in the front row watching them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you described one of the movies you saw as just all right, which is not the barometer of a success for a film. The recent Buzz Lightyear film, I'm looking at you. I do think I'm going to be in because I think that there's opportunity. I think there's selective opportunity because when I thought about this question, I was sort of quickly flying through the parks in my head. And I didn't think about a specific attraction, but I think that there are ways to take some of the IP that was created for the parks as opposed to the opposite and expand on those. I know we've heard rumor of it for years. I would love, whether it's Disney Plus, whether it's a feature film, because I think if done correctly, I think there is a series of movies, of stories, of Disney Plus episodes that could be created around the Society of Explorers and Adventurers. It is something that has permeated all of the parks worldwide, as well as Disney Cruise Line. We're seeing it sort of dropped in other little places, even comic books, and there's Easter eggs sort of everywhere. I'm hoping that it's trying to lay the foundation for something that will become a story that is told via different mediums that'll bring attention to those stories, to those characters, and to the richer, deeper layers of storytelling that is happening in the parks. But Matthew, your comment also sort of prompted me to think about how we've been reacting and responding to movies. And I think it's hard because there is the box office, which is the quote unquote barometer of success. But sometimes we see box office numbers. We're like, this movie did really, really well, but maybe I didn't love it. Maybe my kids didn't love it. And we can sort of go through the list. And I started thinking about Marvel. And I am a huge Marvel fan. I have been for years. And going to the movies to see a Marvel movie, especially during that sort of phase 2, phase 3 was just, but tell me, Matthew, I think you can go first this time. Avengers Endgame was the last great, epic, truly like amazing Marvel film. Are you in or are you out?
So now
I know you're a big Eternals fan, so I don't want to step on you there, but
Icarus. I'm trying to think of the movies that came out after it, and
I'll help you.
The fact that you're trying to think of them speaks volumes.
Right. That's
Black Widow, Eternals, Shang-Chi, Multiverse of Madness, Thor, Love and Blunder. I'm sorry, Love and Thunder. Excuse me, I misspoke. Wakanda Forever, Quantumania, Guardians 3, The Marvels, Deadpool, Wolverine, Brave New World, The Thunderbolts, and Fantastic Four First Steps.
So, I mean, there's enjoyable movies in there. There were movies that I was like, oh, this is a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. The specific wording of your question, like the last great epic, Endgame was it. Like that was the end of the line, I think, when it came to those epic stories that were being told. There was a few in there that I was hopeful for, like Multiverse of Madness, I thought had the potential to be like the next really big thing. And while I enjoyed the film to an extent, it was not, I didn't leave that theater going, I have to go see that again. I'm like, I'm going to go buy another ticket. When I watched Endgame, I was ready to go back up to the front counter and buy another ticket if I could to watch it again. So I have a lot of hope for Doomsday, for what's coming out, because it is an Avengers movie. But no, I feel like, Endgame was the last of the big epic Marvel movies.
I think the Russo brothers and it being an Avengers film, I think the way that they are marketing this film, I've got that feeling again. I've got that little like thing right here in my heart that has me excited for it. And I'm watching the trailers over and over again, and I'm looking for those Easter eggs. And I didn't feel that with the Marvel. I did leave Spider-Man Far From Home inadvertently out, but I don't even think that one rose to the level of Endgame. Lisa?
Endgame.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all looking at Doomsday with what I would call like hopeful optimism. Like it looks like they're going back to the versions of the characters that we love, and not the versions of the characters that they sort of mocked for their own entertainment. I love seeing Thor and Captain America and the other teasers that they've given us with where the characters are sort of back in that like serious, meaningful version of themselves. That being said, like Endgame was lightning in a bottle. It wasn't because and Endgame was a phenomenal movie, but also like it wasn't just about Endgame. It was about like the 20 plus movies that made us fall madly in love with these characters and their stories and feel so incredibly invested in them leading into Endgame. I mean, I remember after Infinity War ended being like, I'm supposed to go see Ant-Man next? Like, what? Like, how am I going to even sit through that movie knowing that like Endgame is on the horizon? And so like, while there have been a few that like I enjoyed Guardians 3. I don't think it holds a candle to Guardians 1 or 2, just as far as like emotional impact, rewatchability. Like I think it's a good movie, but I don't think it like stands up to the first two. I enjoyed very much Deadpool Wolverine, but I think that was more of like a standalone, like enjoyable movie. It wasn't like, I mean, I know it's part of the, part of the bigger story now, but it's not, I sort of enjoyed it in and of itself and not as a part of the MCU. And so, yeah, I mean, I think like, while I like all of us, I think like really, really hope that Doomsday shows up and does good by these characters that we've grown to love so much and feel so invested in. I'm not walking into Doomsday feeling like the weight of the world on my shoulders and like hoping that things like turn out okay the way that I walked into Endgame after having experienced Infinity War. And so, yeah, like without question. And I think like it speaks volumes too that like when my family turns on Disney Plus and we're in the mood to watch a Marvel movie, it's never a post Endgame movie that we pop on. Never. Unless it's like occasionally Deadpool Wolverine or something, which I will let my kids watch. but yeah, I mean, it's always one of the original Iron Mans or one of the Thors or Guardians, one of the first two Guardians.
They still hold up. They still hold up. I just watched.
Yeah.
Funny thing, I just watched the original Iron Man. I've watched the original Avengers film. I'm probably close to 100 times. Like no kidding. Because it still holds up. Like I still feel, like I still get that feeling when I watch those. It was as I was watching the original Iron Man a couple of weeks ago, like you forget that film came out, nearly 20 years ago and what it represented. And I haven't felt that way in a long time. I think arguably overall Infinity War might be an overall quote unquote better film than Endgame. But man, oh man, that scene, if I'm ever having a bad day, I just sort of fast forward to that scene. And from the moment that, spoiler alert, Cap grabs that hammer, I am smiling and I am feeling it and I am all in.
Yeah.
That lead in from Infinity War that's what makes, I think, Endgame so amazing. It's just how it left us, like you said, Lisa, at the end of Infinity War, when you all go, I can't go home. Like, I'm staying here until the next movie comes out because it crushed us. And no other movie has done that. No other Marvel movie has crushed you to the point where you're like, now I have to wait a year to see what happens and then to get Cap lifting the hammer or on your left. Like, that type of stuff was insane.
And it was the emotional weight.
Wait, you didn't get that same emotional resonance when you saw MODOK on screen? That didn't do it. Just as a quick sort of, appending a two-part question to that, and I know this is somewhat hyperbolic, but does the future of the MCU ride on Avengers Doomsday? And two, is there more riding on Wonder Man, which comes out in just about a week on Disney Plus, than maybe we think? Like, does Wonder Man, now again, Wonder Man is probably a character. I mean, Iron Man was obscure back in 2008, but not probably as obscure as Wonder Man. Does this obscure character and storyline that not many people, unless you're like a hardcore comic book nerd, have heard about, is more riding on Wonder Man on Disney Plus than we might realize? Because if it comes out and doesn't perform well, is there going to be that sense of, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me? Like, it's another one that has not lived up to what we anticipate and have come to expect from Marvel. And do we start to lose, I don't want to say lose the trust, but do we lose a little something? And maybe this is more important than just how well Wonder Man does in the the quote unquote Disney Plus box office?
So I can go ahead,
There's
Matt.
the two parts to the question, right? There's definitely more, I think, hanging on for Doomsday than there is Wonder Man. I think Doomsday, the thing about Doomsday is I'm going to go in. I have all the hope in the world for it. I think it has to be the thing that turns around the MCU, but I think it has to turn it around. I don't think Doomsday is going to stand alone because we know Secret Wars is coming. So I think that story is probably going to overlap into both of those films. And I think we have to give the benefit of the doubt to the whole story, just like Infinity War and Endgame. It's going to lead into it. So I want to see both. And I think that if those two flop, then yeah, I think a lot of Marvel fans are going to be like, maybe they've lost it. When it comes to Wonder Man, like you said, Wonder Man's not as well known. I get a lot of like Guardians of the Galaxy feel in that sense, because before Guardians of the Galaxy came out, a lot of people didn't really know who they were. And it was in my opinion, a pleasant surprise of how good Guardians was. And they did a trilogy, and we have the ride. Like it was received very well. So I think Wonder Man is a character that could be great. They could do the right thing with it. I don't think that it's as important to the future of the MCU as Doomsday is. And honestly, I've come to the point now with the Disney Plus shows to kind of accept the fact that they are not the movies. And they're not going to be the scale of the movies. They're not going to be as widely beloved as the movies are. It's, maybe it continues a bit of the story. I do hope that they go back to more of that, where it is building off of the actual universe rather than these little tiny side shoot-offs that we might not know as much or we don't get as invested in because we know that it's a one-off and we'll never see it again. I'm excited for it, but I don't think that one is as important as Doomsday is.
So I think I'm actually really glad you asked this question, because there was one thing I meant to mention last time that I forgot to mention. And that is potentially the one exception to an impactful, like all-consuming media experience out of the MCU post Endgame was WandaVision. And I think, it obviously didn't have the emotional weight or impact of Endgame, but it was extraordinary to the extent that like it had me reading comic books. Like it had me wanting to learn. It had me wanting to understand the Marvel universe as a whole better. It had me like watching like deep dive YouTube videos on like and full chronologies of Marvel from the beginning to the end.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the water cooler show.
Gather around the social media water cooler to talk about it.
100%. Like I think like the conversations sparked by and the interest sparked by WandaVision, like I think, has been largely unmatched. And so why I think that I think Doomsday to some extent, and I hate to say this, but I think Doomsday to some extent is like, if it's not that, then I'm not going to say I'm done, but like, emotionally I'm no longer invested. But, from a MCU and particularly like a Disney Plus MCU perspective, I think I've sort of just stopped watching shows that feel like homework. Like I've stopped like giving the time to shows that I feel like I need to watch, not so much for their like pure enjoyment value as that like I need to stay up to date for the next thing. And so I would love to see like some sort of one-off show, rise up to the level of WandaVision and like making me interested in the Marvel universe again. Not even just the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the Marvel universe. And so I think, if it doesn't do well, it sort of will fall off my radar like a lot of things have in recent years. But I think that, I won't ignore the fact that like the potential is there for a Disney Plus Marvel show to like steal my interest and the water cooler conversations the way that WandaVision does. So I think that, it doesn't have to be on the big screen for my interest in the MCU to come back full force. But if it doesn't do well, it's just going to sort of go in the basket with everything else recently. But Doomsday, like they've sort of put all their eggs in that basket, and the number of characters that they're bringing back, and bringing back Robert Downey Jr. and bringing back, all the characters that we loved so much. Like if they can't do that right, then I think, I think, it's not to say that I won't watch the movies anymore, but, if they can't do that one right, then I think like a lot of people's faith will be lost.
So before I tell you my thoughts. I have a palate cleanser for you, Lisa, in terms of your, especially on Disney Plus. You know where I'm going with this because we've talked about it in the past. I have 3 words for you, and they are daredevil. It's not for everyone. It is a dark, gritty, violent, but I will plant my flag very, very firmly in the fact that I think that Daredevil, going from the original Netflix to Born Again on Disney Plus, which, by the way, the second season is coming out in literally just a few weeks in March. I am more excited for that than, other than Doomsday. I don't think anything else, but I still think it is some of the best work that Marvel has put on screen, big or small, period, no caveats. Other than I would probably not let your children watch it. Like, until maybe.
Yeah, no, I have to watch it after they go to bed.
19. But my relationship with Marvel, especially on Disney Plus, and this may speak volumes about me as a person, it's like dating a girl for me because it's an emotional roller coaster. And honey, I can't take the ups and downs because for all of the wonderful WandaVisions that you give me, then you give me like Hawkeye and She-Hulk and I'm broken again and I'm very emotionally fragile and I don't know from one series to the next what I'm going to get because it was that roller coaster. I loved WandaVision. I have not since Lost, which is my favorite show ever. There has not been a show that I would stay up to watch and you're texting friends and you want to do the research, right? You wanted to learn more. We were buying the comic books. We were going back and buying, the trade paperbacks. And then he gave me the Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I understand it had its pandemic related problems, and I loved Moon Knight, but, I was watching She-Hulk and sometimes sitting through She-Hulk, like, for the love of God, would you just bring out Daredevil already? Because this is why I'm here. I didn't love Echo, but Agatha all along delivered. So there has been this sort of up and down. And, I don't hear a lot of people talking about, I think the last thing that came out in June, other than like Marvel Zombies and stuff like that, was Ironheart, which I did not think was some of Marvel's best work. So I think this year, on both the big and small screen, is going to be a very, very interesting time for Marvel fans who maybe have been a little sour to sort of maybe distance themselves in their emotional relationship with Marvel and are hoping and waiting for something to bring them back in. And I think there's an opportunity to bring in a whole new legion of Marvel fans that, to your point, Lisa, don't need to try and figure out multiverses and variants and timelines and all these different things. Like, I had notebooks with all kinds of things trying to keep up as I was watching Loki. And I think, you don't want to have to do the work unless it's something that you feel that you want to do, if you want to sort of take those deep dives, not that you have to do homework in order to prepare. All right, let's move on. That ended up being a much longer and deeper conversation, but it just kept on opening additional doors. All right, I'll try and keep this like super. I think this is a super simple-ish question. I don't know who goes first, so it doesn't matter. One of you jump in. Let's just sort of go to the Disney theme parks again. I had this conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago, who was not a local, not a frequent visitor. So tell me, are you in or out? A shorter wait for a quote-unquote good ride is better than a long wait for a great one. Are you in or are you out? A shorter wait for a quote-unquote good ride is better than a longer wait for a quote-unquote great one.
So I think this boils entirely down to whether you're local or not. As a local, I am fully in on that 110%. Like, I am not going to the parks with my kids after school and waiting 3 hours to get on Rise of the Resistance. Like, we're just not doing that. If this was my once in a lifetime trip and or I was giving advice to somebody who is taking a once in a lifetime trip, I would be like, I don't care if the line for a Flight of Passage is 3 hours or not. Like, just wait, go give it the time, bank that into your day and make sure that you get on that attraction before you go home again, if you don't know when you're going to be back. So yeah, I mean, I think it's very perspective based. For me, 1,000%, because a lot of the times, what would be considered like a good ride are like the rides that I love and that my family loves and that are sort of like our comfort rides, like Living with the Land and, TTA and, I mean, obviously could go on and on, but there's dozens of attractions probably that are sort of probably in that like mid-tier good category that are sort of the heart of Disney for me, that I will pop into the park and enjoy, over waiting, for hours on end to get on something like, Rise of the Resistance or Flight of Passage or Guardians. I think Guardians might be the exception. Like we'll do that wait once in a while just because it's so much fun. Like we'll go to the park specifically for that attraction and just wait it out. But yeah, I think my long-winded answer to your very simple question is yeah, like from a local perspective, I'm absolutely in on that. But I understand that the perspective might be very different and my advice might be very different to somebody who is taking that once in a lifetime trip.
Well,
Matthew?
someone who's not a local, I am also in mostly. I'll say mostly because you said the one ride that I would wait long for, and it's Cosmic Rewind. But it's just tough for me because I don't wait. I'm willing to pay the Lightning Lane to get to the front of the line of those big rides because when we usually go once a year. I want to make sure my kids get on everything. We can do everything that we want to do. So I will pay the Lightning Lane for Rise of the Resistance and Cosmic Rewind and all that stuff, so I don't have to wait because I want to make sure that they can get everything else done. I'm also very impatient myself, ADHD or whatever. Standing in a line for 3 hours is like the worst thing. It's like the DMV. Like, why would I want to stand somewhere for 3 hours? That's better at the end, right? But that's a very long time. But the question's subjective, right? What is a good versus great ride? What is a long versus short wait? But overall, if you're going to Disney, everything they have there is enjoyable, right? Every ride you go on, every attraction you go to, you can find some sort of enjoyment out of it. So if you could get on 20 rides with only 15-minute waits or 2 rides with 3-hour waits each, I'm taking the 20 rides. Like it's, yeah, there's so much
the
that it
time
offers.
value of money, right? There's especially if you're not local, there's a time value of money.
Right.
So both of your answers lead me to, there's a lot of other questions I want to ask you. So you talk about the importance of maximizing your time and not wanting to stay online and the willingness. Now think back to when paid Lightning Lanes were announced and the internet lost their collective marbles. Lightning Lane still sells out like most days. So let's take an extension of that and not wanting to wait online and not having to, sort of sit for a long time or stand for a long time. Disney should offer a paid option for guaranteed parade and fireworks viewing in more locations, like a scaled up dessert party model, but maybe without even having the dessert party option. Disney should have a paid option for guaranteed reserved parade and fireworks viewing in more locations. Are you in or are you out? Either one of you.
I'm going out.
First.
I'm going out.
You just contradicted your last answer.
No, I know. Well, because I don't feel like fireworks and parades, it's as much, you don't have to wait like your turn. You just have to find your spot and you can go in. You can get in a lot faster than 3 hours before, a parade starts or something like that. And I feel like Disney already has those options. Like you mentioned, the dessert parties. If you take a VIP tour, you can buy your way into those better spots without needing to be there well in advance of it. I just feel like if they do that with the limited locations and stuff that they probably have, you're taking away from everybody else from being able to view a parade or view, a fireworks show, because that's for everybody, right? When you're on an attraction, there's only so many people who can get on that attraction at a given time. A parade, the entire park can stop and watch the fireworks. So I feel like that should just be, if that's what you want to do and you want to just stand there, and which we have done. Like we've gone to the Halloween party, and I have personally spent like 3 hours in the same spot, so we could watch the parade go by. I could turn around and watch the stage show, and then we stay in the same spot and watch the fireworks. You can do that if you want, but to just say you just buy your way into this, and Disney's going to start taking all of these different locations, I would say I'm out.
I'm actually in on this one. I think, back in the days of like 3 fast passes for your park day, they did offer, as one of the options, special viewing locations for, may it rest in peace, Illuminations, for the parades and the fireworks in Magic Kingdom, and the spaces that they would set aside for it were, not enormous, so it's not like it was to the detriment of other park goers. And I don't love when Disney sort of does a pay-for-play model where it's denying access to other people as a result. I think everybody's should sort of go into their Disney vacation with, equal access and opportunity for what it's worth to the things that they want to enjoy. But like, this is one of those sort of time versus money things. Like, do I want to like maximize my day in Magic Kingdom and not have to hold that place for the fireworks for 3 hours? Maybe that's worth it to me and my family to know that we can sort of walk in at the last minute and still have a decent spot. And also, it's the sort of thing that I think is more of a comfort to, like, again, that like first time or like less experienced guest who like doesn't know that there are a bunch of places to enjoy the parade from different perspectives and lots of different places in the park where the fireworks are cool to watch. Like, if I'm here with my kids for a very first trip and I don't know my way around the parks, maybe it's worth it to me, like, to, not knowing where I should be, know that I could, pay for a spot, know that it's there waiting for me while we enjoy the parks for the rest of the day, and then not wonder if the place that I picked on Main Street is going to end up being an obstructed view because I didn't know any better. And so I think, I miss that being an option when back in the day of FastPass, and as somebody who like doesn't often like these pay to play models, in your Disney park day, I think this is somewhere where it would have a welcome place again, because a more experienced park goer is going to be a lot more comfortable like popping into like the fireworks in Magic Kingdom at the last minute and making sure they have a good view because they know the options, and it's not that big of a deal if you end up watching it from, I do miss that view over the water now that that's closed, but in the back of Magic Kingdom, but that you can sort of watch from, you can watch from the Tangled restrooms and get a beautiful view, or you can watch from, different parts of the park to get a different sort of experience that you wouldn't have to necessarily pay for. So I'm in on this one.
Yeah, I put myself in the shoes not just of a Walt Disney World local or Walt Disney World visitor, but as somebody who has visited the other Disney parks around the world and coming at it from that perspective. I understand that, I'm sometimes of the mindset to a certain degree, in for a penny, in for a pound. Like, you're spending all this time and money to go somewhere, and you really want to see the quintessential fireworks show, or you want to go and see the parade, or you want to go see, the Lion King in Paris and don't want to wait 3 hours. The $17 that I spend for that priority pass is worth it. If I really want to see the spectacular shows over the castle or the drone shows in Paris, would it be worth it? And has it been worth it for me to pay for a spot that I know I'm going to get the overall best experience, as opposed to, standing behind a pole or standing behind somebody whose, daughter is up on the shoulders. And I think that there is absolutely, clearly there is a market for it. So you can look at it both from the guest perspective in terms of giving people what they want, and giving people what I'm sure they've asked for, and from a business perspective as well too. Again, going back to the idea of paid lightning lanes. Before we recorded, I have sort of a library of probably 300 questions that I've written for In and Out. And I always try and write new ones. As I did for this, I probably have 50 more prompts that I wrote, but I want to be respectful of your time and our friend, the listener's time as well. So there's one that I want to ask that is, and I think at this time of year, there's a lot of conversation about it, and I think it's timely. If I could insert the final countdown by Europe in the background, which I can't believe is 40 years old, or the sound of the lost clock counting down its 108 minutes. We are in those final sort of 4 minutes of the retirement of Bob Iger, or so we expect at the end of this year, which I believe it's December 31st is supposed to be his final day. Bob Iger's shoes are too big for one person to fill. And the next CEO of the Walt Disney Company should be a position held by not one, but two people, like an Eisner Wells and a Walt and Roy. Are you in or are you out? Take it away.
I'm in. I'm very much in. And I think, as much as Iger has done extraordinary things, for the company over the years, I think somebody to balance him might not have been the worst idea in the world. I think the park has always been, I think that the Walt Disney Company has always been at its best when it's being led by both a practical person and a creative. Whether that's Walt and Roy or, Eisner and Wells or whoever it is. But I think that I think the company has always been better for it. I mean, it is a corporation. It does have shareholders to answer to. It does need to look at its bottom line at the end of the day. But I think that someone who's there to make sure that the company is still prioritizing creativity and the long-term profitability and value of creativity over short-term gains and over quarterly returns. I think that's better for the health of the company as a whole. And I think that I think that we lose sight of, or certain executives in my opinion have potentially lost sight of the fact that like the park is bigger than the sum of its parts. Things that might not have an outright financial value, like, the Grand Floridian Orchestra or the citizens of Main Street or, the people wandering Hollywood studios or the rivers of America. There might not be a high square footage dollar value to Tom Sawyer Island and the rivers of America, but I think that the park as a whole benefited from that being a presence in the park because, it brought a sort of peace and solitude and it brought a sort of peace to the experience of a Disney vacation as a pair, that balanced out that like frenetic, exhausting part of a Disney vacation. And so I think that the park has always been at its best when there's sort of two people at the top, or if the person exists who can have those two things within them, then that would be amazing as well. But I think the park has always been at its best when you've sort of got two people at the top or two sides of the same mind at the top that can balance between like the reality of having a corporation that needs to answer to its shareholders and its bottom line and its quarterly returns, and somebody who, perhaps can add more long-term value to the corporation by focusing more on creative decisions that might not have an obvious dollar value tomorrow, but will impact the value of the corporation, like when we're grandparents and taking our grandchildren back to the parks to enjoy that place that we enjoyed so much.
I get nauseous when I hear the grandparent word.
Well, but you know what I mean. It's the long-term value and like the sort of like bigger than the sum of its parts, value that has made Disney what it is. And it's the reason Disney isn't Six Flags. It's the reason Disney isn't Universal. They all have their place and they're all fun and they're all good things. But I think like the reason that Disney has stood the test of time and been such a like Goliath in this space for as long as it is that it has understood that, a lot of times it's more complicated. Like the long-term value and the lasting value is more complicated than quarterly returns and the value that's being brought in by every square foot of the park. And so, for that reason, I think Disney has always been at its best when it's got people at the top that can balance those two things.
I mean, you nailed it. I'm in. I definitely think that having two is better than one for every reason that Lisa just mentioned. When you look back in the history of the Disney company, while Iger, in many people's opinion, has done amazing things and grown the company in ways that we probably never thought imaginable with things like Marvel and all that stuff. When you think of like Eisner and Wells and of course Walt and Roy, like they're like on almost a different level because of the relationship that they had. And when you read all the stories about like how they respected each other, but how they also fought each other and how they were still able to do so much for the Disney company, that's what I want to see again. So moving into the next leader of the company, to have somebody who, like Lisa said, is more creative, and then somebody who's more practical, it's very difficult, I think, for one person to be that, right? Iger has proven that he can do both of those things, but maybe not to the same extent as two really good separate people could have done. You're not going to see as much burnout. You're not going to see all these things where it's all on one person's shoulders, where it comes down to them making these decisions. If you have somebody that you have a very good relationship with, that you respect, that you can work well together, it's very difficult to beat that. I'm on a very small scale, like nowhere near the CEO of Disney. I'm a teacher, and a lot of what I do is co-teaching. And I've had teachers that I work very well with, like really, really well with, and I have ones that we didn't get along. So if we are going into the two-person CEO type of mindset, I hope that the vetting process includes not just like, oh, this person's really good with business and the number side, and this guy's really good with the creative stuff. I hope they're also looking at that relationship of, will they be able to work together? And that's going to be like a key part. But I really do hope I'm in. I think that we need two again.
This is a much longer conversation for another day. I think this is something that maybe we'll talk about on our next WDW Radio Nation Zoom call, because I think there's a lot of layers to this onion, and it's about the people who are potentially involved, the people who have come before, and the company as a whole, because the company, since Iger took over, is also vastly different. And it goes to Iger's legacy of acquisition. Like, I think people forget that the Walt Disney Company owns and operates a portfolio of more than 200 different companies and brands. It is no longer just a theme park and movie studio and entertainment company, and forgetting sort of acquiring things like, 20th Century Studios and ESPN and Hulu and Star and all these international companies. I don't know that one person, other than clearly Bob Iger, is able to sort of have expertise in all of those areas. I think there's also a number of other things at play. Like, you wonder, is the company, potentially a little gun shy of bringing in another parks person post Chapek to take on this role? If you do have a sort of two-headed co-CEO, I think you have to find not just people who have the right experience and expertise and leadership skills, but also, for lack of a better word, enough of a confidence of ego to be able to share a co-CEO title, which I'm not sure everyone is able to do. Josh D'Amaro's name is one that's been thrown around repeatedly. I love Josh where he is, having the relationship with both cast and guests that he is able to have in the Parks and Experiences role. As CEO, there will be a distance. There will be a necessary distance, and I don't want that. I love Josh. Like, I love seeing Josh in the parks. I love being able to, as all of us do, get to see and talk to Josh. I think that it's different if and when he becomes CEO. Dana Walden, who's the co-chair of Disney Entertainment, has been the other name that has been thrown around as being a key contender in this race. Would they come together and sort of make the perfect CEO? Possibly, but you wonder, are they willing to share not just the roles and responsibilities, but that title? Is there some other dark horse whose name that we haven't heard yet in the running that we just don't know? And what is the search committee and what is the board looking for beyond stability in that role? Because Disney is on this, incredible path of continued growth. We see it not just in the parks, not just in the media side, but, cruise line as well. I mean, there's a lot of growth that's happening. So who is the quote unquote right person for it? And it's something I would love to chat about more, because clearly we've seen that when two people are able to complement each other well, it has worked very, very, very well. It's still why Michael Eisner is like my white whale of interviews. I think he's been away from the company long enough. I would love to chat with him about his time here. I know he doesn't really do interviews. I don't want to talk about when he left, I want to talk about what he built and what it was like to sort of create, especially here in Walt Disney World. A lot of what we have now, people don't realize we owe a lot to Michael Eisner. Very much a longer conversation. I'd love to continue in the clubhouse. I'd love to hear your thoughts about any of these in or out questions. Go to www.radio.com/clubhouse. Let's chat about it there. Call the voicemail. You can yell at me. You can yell at Lisa or Matt. They're fine. They can take it at 407-900-9391. That's 407-900-WDW1. Thank you guys so much. I have so many more in or out questions that I would love to ask you. We will definitely have to do this again. But before we go, please tell people who you are, what you do, and where they can find you. Lisa Denoto Glassner and then Matthew Woolley.
This is always such a fun conversation. I'm always kind of sad when it's done and I wonder what's still on your list. But this was great. My name is Lisa Denoto Glassner. You can find me at thecastlerun.com, where I talk about finding a life and rewriting a life that calls to us as Disney locals in the context of Disney and Run Disney. I'm a runner as well. You can also find me at thousandcircles.com, where I share my fine art Disney photography and portrait work that I do here at the parks and resorts. And I share out a Disney photograph every single day via email through that website with a little love note that comes along with it. I'm also very active on Instagram at The Castle Runner, where I cover all of those things.
I'm Matt. I am half, the lesser half of Married to a Disney Addict. My wife is definitely the better, I'll say 3/4 of the team. But we have a fun little Disney fan group over on Facebook and Instagram at Married to a Disney Addict. We have a podcast, the same name, Married to a Disney Addict. We do lots of fun stuff. I love doing this with Louis. I mean, we're WDW Radio Nation members. We are purchasers of many of Lisa's pictures and candles, so definitely go to 1,000 Circles and get all that stuff because it's amazing. But Lou, I had so much fun. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's always amazing when we hear from you, so thank you.
Thank you guys for being here. This is a lot of fun. And yeah, I have, I think, like 43 more in or out prompts, so we will definitely do this again. All right, very quick lightning round. One question for each of you. Matthew first. You are a parent of young children. Leaving the park midday for a resort break is the smartest, best parental Walt Disney World strategy. Are you in or out?
So if it's quick, I'm saying out. We go. We might go a little bit later than we used to, but if they're tired, they can sleep in the stroller, and everybody else can kind of go and do what they have to do. If I'm at Bay Lake and I'm at Magic Kingdom, I can like walk over there real quick. Maybe that changes it, but I'm not waiting on a bus to get there back. So we're in the park.
I agree. I am with you. I am in on that. We did not sleep in the stroller. Kids, you're going to have fun whether you like it or not. No, but it was like, and it conditions them to being out in the park all day. Lisa, the black and white cookie is the best menu item at any one of the Epcot festivals. Are you in or out?
I knew that was what you were writing down when you said you were writing something down. The black and white cookie is an abomination. I think that's the word that I usually use. It is not a black and white cookie. It is a lemon scone with icing on it. It is not a good thing. If you want a good black and white cookie, I would honestly go to Publix before I would go to. I have a lot of love for the L'Chaim booth and all of its offerings, but the black and white cookie I would definitely acquire elsewhere.
I'm going to get multiple black and white cookies from multiple locations. I'm going to go to Parade's and Publix and 2J's and the L'Chaim booth, and we're going to do like the Pepsi challenge and do a blind taste test because your face in eating the L'Chaim cookie, you should be grateful that I do this on audio. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Can't wait to do this again soon.
This is a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
An abomination. I've never heard anything. It's Lisa at thecastlerun.com, chefs. So
They should know. It's not a good